Welcome back to Rock'em Sock'em Radio. I'm your host, the People's Interim Champ, and today we're talking about the recent UFC 300 fight announcement, Zhang versus Yan for the strawweight world title. That's a fuck up, and we're going to talk about the other reasons why Dana White should retire. That's right, today I'm talking about my spiciest of spicy hot takes, possibly the spiciest hot take in the game. Basically, I'm going to go over why this one is a major fuck up and talk about the other recent fuck-ups, and they all add together to paint a bigger picture of why Dana White should retire. Now, for context, if you don't know, Dana White recently announced an unworthy title fight for UFC 300, which is currently incomplete, but from a big picture point of view, I'm going to argue like a lawyer with proof why the UFC has failed to conquer the Chinese market and discuss why, and quickly list the other reasons Dana White has piled on fuck up after fuck up, showing it might be Hunter Campbell time. Let's get into it. Now, it's generally accepted in MMA media and amongst MMA fans that it's a no-brainer to have Zhang versus Yan in China to develop the Chinese viewership and fans. There's obviously 1 billion people in China. If you can get 1% of 1 billion people to watch, that's 10 million viewers. From that 10 million, it's inevitable you'll get some fight fans out of it. From some of those fight fans, it's inevitable you get some pay-per-view buyers out of it, and that's the booming Chinese middle-class money, which is too tempting not to court. So I don't know why the UFC is essentially giving up on the Chinese market, and I'll go into the reasons why the UFC clearly giving up on the Chinese market. The Chinese audience is like any other audience. They basically want to see people that look like them on the big screen. Everyone wants Jesus to be their race. It's the same principle here. To illustrate that point, I'm going to quickly talk about an English Premier League match in football or soccer if you're American. It was an unremarkable match, Man City versus Everton in 2003, but the only thing worth talking about is that it had 350 million viewers because both teams had one Chinese player each, and they weren't even good players. Zhang versus Yan is the UFC's equivalent of this if they play the cards right, and yet they fucked it up. Here's 4 reasons why the UFC have fucked it up. 1, they've missed their opportunity not being in China. It would sell out clearly an arena, and I imagine they have some pretty big arenas in China. Reason number 2, they could have Song Yudong as the co-main event, and if China is going to have a male Chinese champ one day, it's going to be Song Yudong. Hell, maybe even give Song Yudong some Dana White privilege, give him that title shot he doesn't deserve just to make some moolah. Kobe Covington, Chito Vera, they're recent title challengers that don't deserve a title shot, and this is no different. If, or more like when, Song Yudong loses, so what? You promoted him, and you've possibly made a Chinese star in China. Reason number 3, Zhang versus Yan doesn't sell pay-per-views. It's not UFC 300 material. UFC 300 is about selling pay-per-views. If it doesn't sell 1 million pay-per-views, and Conor McGregor retires in 2024, the powers that be won't be happy. UFC 100 sold 1.6 million pay-per-views. UFC 200 sold 1 million pay-per-views. If UFC 300 sells less than 1 million pay-per-views, everything's going the wrong way. Now, put Zhang versus Yan in China as a fight night card, and that makes sense. Now, the 4th and final reason is look at Road to UFC. That's a perfect example of why the UFC has given up on the Chinese market. It's a half measure. It's almost unwatchable. They shouldn't have bothered spending money on the budget on the show if they're only going to bury it on Fight Pass where no one can find it. It has 0 promotion, and that's fine because it's shit anyway. Now let's dig a little deeper and see what UFC is doing in the African market in comparison to the Chinese market. Now, I'll take it back first. Some years ago, at the end of the Zuffa era, the UFC was obsessed with world domination. They're now richer and bigger than ever. Now they're entering the African market and continuing to enter the Mexican market with 2 more UFC PIs. Mexico is somewhere Dana has always wanted to conquer, has been trying to do so since Cain Velasquez was the heavyweight champion of the world. He's been pushing for the Mexican market ever since. Fair play, that makes sense. But for UFC Africa, now this might be a stereotype, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a tourist in Africa, you ain't leaving the coach, you ain't leaving the hotel, and you ain't leaving the resort, and that's the place the UFC wants to put their investment strategy into. What the fuck, Dana? There's red flags and visions of millions being wasted. This is a bad business plan, and I want the best for MMA and UFC. I want it to be as international and as Tekken-like as possible. But no, the UFC's given up on the Chinese market, along with the huge potential growth and guap and viewers that the Chinese market offers. The UFC rarely misses, but lately there's more misses than ever. So now let's list the other recent Dana White and UFC fuck-ups that all paint this bigger picture of retirement. Number 1, there's messing up the Chinese market. Number 2, there's power slap. Need I say any more? Number 3, there's letting UFC commentary go to shit. There's 4, not keeping and properly promoting Francis Ngannou, who's a huge star for the PFL on boxing now. 5, Dana trying to become a personal brand, and it's just becoming an embarrassing dad wearing Travis Scott trainers. Fuck It Friday videos and hanging out with 20-somethings. Reason number 6, fighter pay never improving despite the huge UFC success in recent years. 7, not letting the UFC lawsuit and the trial is in April. Not letting the UFC lawsuit settle, I should say, and the trial's in April. That could really fuck things up if it goes to trial and doesn't go the right way for the UFC. Now the last reason, reason number 8, is replacing Reebok with Venom. Now here's the big picture conclusion. Dana White isn't as devoted to the UFC brand anymore. He's too busy multitasking on power slap in a midlife crisis. That's bad for business. Dana started to become bad for business by not paying fighters or promoting them to the fullest extent. Francis Ngannou is a huge miss by not paying him and promoting him. There should be way more new stars ready to be as big as Francis for when Conor and Nate retire. Bring on Hunter Campbell. The Hunter Campbell era is upon us, that's what I say, but what do you think?